Hi and welcome to another live class 16 of my intermediate level English course. So before we begin, let's see who we have in the chat. And let me just check that the sound is working okay. Yeah. So we've got Viviana Cafiero, I think that's correct pronunciation. And we've got Tania, and we've got Anna Dalia, we've got Michelle. Where are you from? Which countries are you from? Which countries are you from? We've got Rosa Maria Reyes Chavez. Who else? That's about it at the moment. So, and Carolina Cruz from El Salvador. So today, and Marcos and Karine, Rosa from Mexico. Anybody else? Anybody from Spain? Anybody from Colombia? And Natalia from Mexico. Jennifer, Michelle from Jalisco. From somebody from Spain. Somebody from Uruguay. Omar from Uruguay. Eureka from Venezuela. Tom from Ecuador. Okay, in today's class, we're going to be looking at another modal verb. In the last two classes, we've been looking at modal verbs, and today we're going to be looking at another modal verb, a modal verb that we saw before, which is can. And we're going to be looking at talking about ability. Now, before we continue, remember, if your video is blurred, it's because you need to change the settings. I'm looking at my own video now and it's very blurred because, let me show you again like I did yesterday. Here is my laptop and I can see my video and it's very blurred. It's not clear. And the reason is this here, because here in the settings, you need to change the quality of your video. Right now, this quality is 144p, which is really low quality. So this is on the laptop. You need to change that. You need to try and put it on 720, and then the text is very clear. What happens, I always mention in my classes, because a lot of people have a problem. What happens is that YouTube are downgrading the quality if your internet is slow. So if it's still blurry, then you need to watch the recording. So let's continue with the class then. Today we're going to be talking about ability, another modal verb to talk about ability. I think I'll move this video down here so that, and try and make it a little bit, that's probably better. What we'll be doing today is talking about ability using the modal verb can. Well, there are two ways we can talk about ability. We'll be looking at can, which we've seen before. We'll be looking at the past of can, which in this sense is could. And we'll also be looking at the phrase, these two here are what we've seen before, they are modal verbs. Can and could are modal verbs. In the last two classes we've been looking at modal verbs. Can and could are modal verbs. Can and could are modal verbs. We've seen modal verbs in the last two classes. I think this is class 16, so class 14 was talking about obligation with the modal verb must. And yesterday, what did we look at yesterday? I've forgotten what we did yesterday. Yesterday was talking about making assumptions, deductions, assumptions and deductions with the modal verb must, and also the negative of can, can't. For example, we saw yesterday, he can't. Today we're going to look at can again, but that was another use of can. Or in the negative we can use can't. We saw yesterday that in the negative we can use can't to talk about negative deduction. For example, I think an example we saw yesterday with can't was using can't for ability was something like they're speaking Japanese. They're speaking Japanese. They can't be Chinese. Now this is an assumption. Here I'm using can't to make a negative assumption or a deduction. I don't know if they're Chinese, but I assume, I'm 99% certain that they're not Chinese because they're speaking Japanese. But today we'll be looking at can for ability. It's another use of can. So sometimes these modal verbs have more than one use. Here we'll be looking at can for ability and the opposite can't for negative ability. So can and could are modals, and could is the past of can when we're talking about ability. And be able to is another expression that we'll be looking at, which is also used to talk about ability. Now just let me check the chat for a minute. Yeah, nothing in there. So important. So let's begin. Can for ability. I can see the mountains from my house. Yeah, so this is something that, another way of saying that is to say, like this one here. Here I've got the same phrases actually. Another way of saying that is to say, I'm able to see the mountains from my house. I can see. It's an ability. It's possible for me to see them. He can speak a little Spanish. It's an ability. Another way of saying it would be, he's able to speak a little Spanish. Can you speak Chinese? Asking somebody a question about their ability. Another way of saying the same thing would be to say, are you able to speak Chinese? Are you able to speak Chinese? They can't come to your party. Negative ability. Another way of saying the same thing would be, they aren't able to come to your party. Let me just move this here a bit. So this is all of these here, and all of these here are in the present simple tense, in the present tense. We're talking about now. So here we have two ways. I can see the mountains from my house. He can speak a little Spanish. Can you speak Chinese? They can't come to your party. Or we can say, I'm able to see the mountains. He's able to speak Spanish. Are you able to speak Chinese? They aren't able to come to your party. So in the present tense, we have two ways of talking about ability. Sonia says, can and be able to is similar. Can and be able to is the same. Here in these sentences, it means exactly the same thing. Let's have a look at the structure. So first of all, with can is a modal verb. So as we've seen with all the other modal verbs, the structure is always the same. We're going to use the subject first of all. In this case, in the first one, it's I. And then we need to put the modal verb, the auxiliary verb, can, and then we need to put the main verb. The same thing that we saw in the last two classes. Remember, never, ever, ever put to there. That is incorrect. When we have a modal verb, we never put to there. Never. So let's remove that. This is the structure when we use the modal verb. We're just using the subject. In the second example, we have he, followed by the modal can, followed by the main verb. The main verb is always in the base form. It's always in the base form with any modal. Here we have a question. The only thing we need to do in the question is reverse the order. That is, in the question, it's modal, subject, main verb. In the statement, it's subject, modal, main verb. This one here is a question, so we need to reverse the order. And finally, we have a negative. To form the negative is very easy. We just put the word not after the modal verb. But when native speakers speak, they don't say they cannot come. We nearly always say they can't come. The pronunciation of can't, I say can't because I'm from England. The pronunciation in American English is slightly different. Actually, I can't, it's a good example. I can't do an American accent. But in British English, it's something like this, because in British English, we actually change the sound of the vowel. We say can. And when we say the negative, we say like can't. We actually change the vowel sound in the negative. But in American English, they don't do that. I can't do an American accent, and I'm not going to try and do an American accent. I'm very bad at accents. So what I suggest is, if you just go on to, like I always recommend, the Oxford Learner's Dictionary, and you look up, they always have on here the American and the British pronunciation. So here's can't. I don't think you'll be able to hear it on this, but
can't.
Well, maybe.
Can't.
That's the way I say it. That's British English. Here it says British English.
Can't.
And I think,
can't.
I hope you can hear
Can't.
that.
Can't. Can't. Can't.
It's different. So
Can't.
you can just check out
Can't.
that website. In American English, they pronounce the negative differently. It's more like can't, can't. So let's go back to this. The modal verbs, they can't come to your party. Here, negative, so sounds like an E, Just check out the dictionary to hear the two different pronunciations. If you're in Britain, use the British pronunciation. If you're in the United States, try and use the American pronunciation. So the other way that we have here on the other side of talking about ability is to use the verb, the subject, followed by the verb be in the correct tense, in the correct form and in the correct tense, plus the word to, the preposition to, plus the base verb. So let me just highlight that. Here, here it's I am, but again I'm using a contraction. I am able to see the mountains. It's the same as saying I can see. He is able to speak Spanish. He is able to speak Spanish. Question, we need to put the verb be first, followed by the subject. In the statement, we have the subject, followed by the verb be, followed by able, followed by to, followed by the main verb. And in the question, we need to put the verb be first, followed by the subject. We're changing the order, and there's no contraction. We're changing the order. So let's just highlight that. The question. We know this is a question because we've reversed the order, and also we have the question mark here. And finally, a negative. Again, here we're going to put the word not. They are not, but again, we're going to use the contraction. Now, these two mean the same, using can. or using. Both of these are in the present. But normally, we don't use this form. When we're talking in the present, we use can. I can see the mountains. It's very unusual for a person to say, I'm able to see the mountains. It's very unusual for a person to say he's able to speak Spanish. It's very unusual to use this form in the present. This in the present sounds very formal, very formal. Nearly always in 90 or 95%, I think, of situations, people are going to use can to talk about ability in the present. So then you're going to ask me, why did you tell us this? Well, the reason is that I wanted this as a reference because in a minute we will see that we need to use be able to when we are talking in other tenses, because can only exists in two tenses, can in the present and could in the past. If we want to talk in another tense, we need to use this be able to structure, changing the verb be into the correct form. We'll see that in a minute, but I put it here for reference. But normally I don't recommend that you use this one in the present. Normally in the present you're just going to say, I can speak Spanish, I can speak Chinese, can you speak Chinese? I can't come to your party. You're going to use this form here, not this form. Now, the past of can, down here we got the past. Let me move this page up so that we can see the two past forms. So here we have the two past forms talking about ability in the past. The past of can is could. The past of can is could. When we're talking in the past, all we're going to do is just, instead of saying can, we're talking about ability in the past, we're going to say could. So, here's some examples. Mozart could play the piano when he was 3. Mozart could play the piano when he was 3. So again, it's the same structure. We have the subject. This time the subject is Mozart. We have the modal verb could, which is the past of can, and we have the main verb play, which is the verb we use for musical instruments. We also use play for games like football in English. So it's the same structure, it's another modal verb. In the question, it's the same. We need to reverse the order. Could you speak English when you were a child? And the negative, instead of cannot or can't, we use could not or couldn't. People don't normally say could not, they say couldn't. We're going to use the contractions again. And also here I have the past of the other structure, be able to. So all we need to do to put, let's go back up there and get that other one that I had here. Let's move that down there so we can look at these two. So here we have the present of be able to. To put it in the past, all we need to do is change the verb be. We're only going to change the verb be. Instead of here, he is, we say he was, or in this case it's Mozart, he was. So we need to put the verb be into the past. He was able to play. We're only changing one thing. He was able to play. In the present, it would be he is able to play. And in the past, he was. Were. Instead of are you able to speak English, we need to put the verb be in the past. Remember, the verb be in the past is was or were. This is a question. We need to put the verb be first. So again, in the past, we have two choices. We can say Mozart could play the piano when he was 3, Mozart was able to play the piano when he was 3. In this case, it's synonymous. But again, in this particular case, we are more likely to use could. A native speaker is more likely to say Mozart could play the piano when he was 3 than Mozart was able to play the piano when he was 3, because this one here is more formal. So you can compare these, we're just changing the verb be. So just to summarize, some people say they don't understand no entiendo, I don't know why. Well, that's Spanish, that's very bad, no Spanish in the class. So here, let's just summarize this page. Talking about ability in the present, use can. I can see the mountains from my house. He can speak a little Spanish. Can you speak Chinese? Question. They can't come to the party. Remember the difference here between American and British pronunciation. Check the dictionary online. They cannot come to the party. Well, we don't say that last one. And the past is Mozart could play the piano when he was 3. Could you speak English when you were a child? They couldn't come to the party. This part here, this thing doesn't work. All of this here is the most important for talking about present and past ability. But we also have down here the other structures that we talked about, using be able to in the present with the verb be in the present, and in the past with the verb be in the past. But remember, what I told you about this one is that it's not commonly used because it sounds too formal. Let's continue with the next page. Now, on the next page, I've got a note which deals with a difference between using could and be able to when we're talking about the past. And the difference is this. In the past, use could for general ability and use be able to for a particular situation. For example, when I was a child, I could swim a long way. That's a general ability. So with a general ability, I need to use could. With a general ability, something that I could do when I was a child. But if I have one specific example of something that was difficult, let's say, I could say it like this. It was very difficult to swim across the river, but with a lot of effort, I was able to do it. So this is a specific, something that was difficult to do, but you achieved it, or you could put it in a negative if you didn't achieve it. We need to use was able to. It's an additional rule. It's a difference between could and was able to. In the present, they're the same. I can speak Spanish, or I can speak a little Spanish. Somebody is asking what effort means. So let's just check in the dictionary. Luckily, I've got the dictionary open. Effort means a physical or mental energy that you need to do something, something that takes a lot of energy. You should put more effort into your work. A lot of effort has gone into making this event a success. The company has invested a great deal in time and effort. It's a long way to climb to the top, but well worth the effort. Those are examples of effort. So in this case, when you put in a lot of effort, or with a lot of effort, it means it was difficult. Lewis says, I was able to climb tall trees. This sentence is correct. That sounds like a general ability. So you would use could for that. When I was a child, I could climb trees, or I could climb tall trees. If it's a general ability, then we need to use could. But if it's a specific, something that was difficult to do, then it's better to use was able to, or if it's with a different subject, we would say they were able to. Another way of saying that, which maybe is more common, is to say I managed to do it. I managed to do it is another way of talking about something that was difficult in the past, but you achieved it. It was very difficult to swim across the river, but with a lot of effort, I managed to do it. I managed to do it. Or I was able to do it. So this page here is a little rule that generally speaking, using can in the present, or using can in the present, is the same as using be able to. I can speak Spanish, I am able to speak Spanish. It's the same. But here in the past, if we want to talk about general ability, we need to use could. And if we want to talk about a specific event that was difficult, then we need to use was able to. Okay, now let's have a look at the next page, because the thing about can and could is it only exists, as I mentioned earlier, in two tenses. It only exists in two tenses. If we want to talk about an ability in another tense, then we need to use be able to. Let's have a look in here, see what people are saying in the chat. Yeah, no questions. So, if we're the advantage with be able to, we don't want to use be able to in the present because it sounds very formal, but here I have it written in many different tenses, and this is the advantage of be able to. For example, here we have you're able to speak. This is in the present tense, and this is, like we saw earlier, is synonymous with saying I can, you can speak. This is synonymous, and normally a person would say you can speak English. That is what people would say. The next one, we've got it in the past. All we're doing each time is just changing the verb be. This part here is the same. This part here is the same, but we need to put the verb be in the correct tense. So this one is in the past, this one is in the present, the verb be is in the present. The next one is have been. What tense is that? Can anybody tell me what tense that is? Have been. Can somebody tell me what this tense is? Have been able to speak. Can anybody tell me the name of that tense? Let me carry on a bit. Look at these other tenses. What's the name of this tense? Here, what I'm doing is putting the verb be in the correct tense. And I'm talking about ability in that tense. We can't do that with can. Can only exists in the present and the past. So if we want to talk about an ability in another tense, we need to use the be able to structure, putting the verb be in the correct tense. Yeah, and I got some answers there. Sonia, Melissa, Sonia, Guillermo, can't pronounce that, sorry, Viviana, they are telling me that this one here is in the present perfect. Very good. Yeah, that's correct. That's in the present perfect. So we're talking about ability there in the present perfect. These are tenses that we've seen before. This one here, somebody has told me, Viviana has told me, it's in the future simple. We put the verb be in the future simple. So this one here is ability in the future. This one here is the going to structure. You are going to be. So we can put this in any tense. This is the great thing about be able to. We can also use it with modals. You might be able. All the time, just changing the verb be. That means it's a possibility. You may be able. Another way of saying possibility, but the same as might be, but more formal. You should be able, using should. You must be able, that we saw yesterday is like an assumption. I'm assuming that you can speak English. And finally, this one, we can use any structure we've got here. I'd like to be able to speak English. I'd like to be able to speak English. So this is the thing about, Viviana says must for obligation. Well, must, we've seen must has two uses. You must be able to speak English. Yeah, it could have the two meanings. It depends on the context. You could say, for this job, you must be able to speak English. In that case, it's obligation. But if I say, she's been studying English for 10 years, she must be able to speak English, in that sense, then it's an assumption. So it has the two meanings. But the point is that, and as Viviana says, going to for plans, the point is here that can and could can only be used in the present and the past, but be able to is can be used in any tense. I just realised maybe you can't see that. Let me move the page up a bit. I didn't mention the negative of be able to. To form the negative, we just put the verb be in the negative. Here I have some examples here. For example, I haven't been able to contact him. Here we have been able to in the past. I haven't been able to contact. I won't be able to go. Future simple negative. We're using won't be able to. And they weren't able in the past. So this is how they weren't able to visit her. So I think that basically covers everything. Let's have a look and see. I've got some questions somewhere. Where are the questions? Oh, I lost the questions. There should be some questions here. What happened to those questions? Hold on. No. Oh, there they're down there. Hold on. Let's move them up. There. So we got some questions here. We need to put the correct word, can, could, be able to in the correct tense in the spaces to talk about ability. So let's have a look in the chat. Can anybody give me the answers? Let me make this bigger because obviously you can't see it like that. Let's just move that over there. Is that okay? Let's move that out of the way. So who can give me the answer to the first question? Not able to see. Yeah, my car has broken down, so I can't pick you up from school today, says Melissa. Yeah, I think that's good. I think you could also put that in the future. You could say can't, or maybe you could say won't be able to. I think both is possible there. But let's just put can't in there. Number one is can't. I'll have to move these in a minute, I think. Let's put that there. Can't, I think, is the answer there. I can't pick you up from school today. Number two. Who can give me the answer to number two? I can't pick you up from school today. Number two. I had a lot of work to do, but I This one here, this verb here is in the past, so we know we're talking about the past. Anybody got the answer? Will be able to. Is that the answer to this one? No, this is in the past here. This is past. Past. So here we're talking about something that was difficult. Yeah, very good. Sarah and Viviana have the correct answer. Here we need to use was able to. I was able to finish it all in time. Or another possibility would be I managed to finish it all in time. We have two choices there. Here we wouldn't use could because it's not a general ability. It's something specific, something that was difficult. She had a lot of work. How many instruments? How many instruments? How many instruments can? Some people say can. Hold on a minute, let me just check something here. Can. Yeah, very good. How many instruments can you play? How many instruments can you play? How many instruments can you play? Number 4. Number 4, I think it's, yeah. What? Use the one which would be could. Yeah, Sarah has put could, and that is the correct answer. Could. Yeah, here we want to use could. If we can use could, we're talking about a general ability, so we wouldn't say were you able. Could. 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 The washing machine isn't working and I call a technician. What's the word that goes in here? Anybody? Can anybody tell me the word that goes in here? I'm not able to. I guess it could be. I would say I can't. I think it's got to be in the present. Yeah, okay, I'm not able to is synonymous, but as I said earlier, people don't normally use that structure in the present. It sounds very formal. So here it's better to say, I can't repair it. I can't repair it. Remember the difference between American and British pronunciation. I'm from England, so I say can't, but check the American pronunciation. After the operation, how many instruments you able to play? No, that's not correct. We've already got the one there. How many instruments can you play? Number 6, after the operation, he walked for a week. Sound better? Can I? Don't understand that question. After the operation, he could walk for a week. No, an operation is when somebody goes to hospital. So we assume that it's a negative. Well, I guess it's could be ambiguous because you could imply that the operation was a success. But I don't think if you had an operation, you would say he could walk for a week. I guess realistically you could put either, but the answer that I think sounds best is after the operation, he couldn't walk for a week. I mean, he couldn't walk for a week. But I guess it's possible also to say he could walk for a week and then he couldn't walk again because the operation was only a partial success. But I think the second is less likely. I think it's more likely this one. Sometimes it's difficult to write questions. My sister swim very well, but she's having lessons. Can't, very good. Sarah says can't. My sister can't swim very well, but she's having lessons. My sister can't swim very well, but she's having lessons. Number 8, we get a good signal in the bedroom. It's really weak. Get a good signal in the bedroom. It's really weak. This is in the present, so this needs to be in the present too. Melissa says can't. Very good. Yeah, it's can't. Here we're talking about a signal like a Wi-Fi signal. A Wi-Fi signal, for example. Or it could be a TV signal. I guess it could be a cell phone signal, but let's put there Wi-Fi signal in the bedroom. It's really weak. Weak is the opposite of strong. Cheetahs. A cheetah is an animal. Cheetahs reach a speed of 70 miles per hour. When you see mph, it means miles per hour. In the United States and in England, we use miles, not kilometers. 1 mile is like 1.6 kilometers. Cheetahs can, says Viviana. Very good, yeah. Cheetahs can. Cheetahs can reach. But, this is a contrast, but they keep it up for a long time. Who's got the answer here? Sarah's put aren't able to. Aren't able to is possible, but normally we don't use that structure in the present. I put it there for reference so that I could show you the other tenses. Why don't use able to reach? Because we don't normally use the be able to structure in the present. It is perfectly correct to say cheetahs are able to reach. There's nothing grammatically, there's nothing wrong with that sentence, but normally people don't say that. They say, especially in spoken English, because it's very formal. In a book, maybe, in written English, maybe it would say cheetahs are able to reach a speed of 70 miles an hour. But people don't normally use, the thing is you can use it, but it's formal. It's formal. In informal spoken English or day-to-day English, people in the present normally use can. We normally only going to use the be able to in other tenses where we can't use can, because can only exists in the present or in the past with could. So yeah, it's correct. Maybe in that case, if you read that in a book about cheetahs, it possibly would say cheetahs are able to reach a speed of 70 miles per hour in written English. In written English. And what about this one? But they, well, Melissa already said can't, but they can't. If we're spoken English, probably we would say can't. Written English, probably would say aren't. Or if it was written English, you probably wouldn't even, if it was in a book, they probably wouldn't even use the contraction. I'm not able to keep it up. So again, here, depending on the context, if it's written, we would use let me delete the ones I've got above because they're getting in the way now, so that I can move this up. Number 10. Number 10. Can't and can. No, I think you got it the wrong way round. Viviana says can. I think we were talking about number 10. I don't know. Yeah, Jill can understand Chinese, but she can't write it. Again, here we could use Jill is able to, but I don't want to use that because really we don't normally use the be able to structure in the present. So here, I mean, I guess this again is ambiguous. Maybe, let me get rid of these here. Maybe it's the other way round. Maybe we could say Jill can't understand Chinese, but she can write it. But logically, that doesn't make so much sense because basically Chinese is easier to understand than it is to write it. It's very difficult for a foreign learner to write Chinese because it has many different characters. So it's more likely to be this way round. She can understand it, but she can't write it. She can't write it. Number 11, we see anything because there was a woman wearing a big hat in front of us. We see anything because there was a woman wearing a big hat in front of us. This, here we know from this sentence, from this part, we know that this is in the past. Yeah, so Javier has the right answer. We couldn't see anything. I think here is much more likely, so maybe something that I didn't mention earlier, but when we have words like see to do with the senses like see or hear, is more likely that we're going to use could than was able to or were able to. When we have things like see or hear, verbs to do with the senses. So the correct answer here is we couldn't see anything because there was a woman wearing a big hat in front of us. It's in the past. Number 12, he was so drunk that he... Yeah, he couldn't, he was so drunk that he couldn't open, so I put open twice, couldn't open the door. Also here we could put wasn't able to open the door. This is not a general ability, but for some reason couldn't sounds better, but I guess we can use either. Something is wrong with the computer. I connect to the internet. Can't, says Melissa. Very good. Number 14. Why you help me with my homework? Yeah, this has got to be a negative here, as Viviana says. Why can't you help me with my homework? Why can't you help me with my homework? Number 15. Donald found a job last week despite the difficult job market. Anybody got the answer here? Well, Melissa says could, but this here should really be was able to is better here because, or the other alternative we could put is managed to, because this is something, a single event in the past which was difficult. So that's an example of where we're more likely to use was able to, or the alternative is to use managed to. And finally, the last one. My son walked when he was 8 months old. Anybody got the correct answer? I don't know if the chat is slow, but the answer is, yeah, very good. Could. My son could walk. My son could walk. Because this is a general ability. Okay, and I think that's all I've got today for this subject. Thank you very much for watching this class, and I hope to see you next week. Goodbye.